I promise this is not a sad story. A little bit less than a year ago, I got sick. Really sick. They call it MECFS, or maybe it's long COVID. Doctors say it doesn't really matter, it's probably the same disease anyway. About the same difference as Overwatch 1 and 2. It destroys your energy metabolism. It can't be cured and it never goes away. Walking a mile feels like running a marathon. A dinner with friends, like pulling 2 all-nighters in a row. So I don't talk as much as I used to, and I don't walk as much as I used to. I sleep a lot, dreaming of being awake. Somewhere in there, I play games and I write about it. A page or 2 a day when I feel good. Wouldn't want to go crazy. It changed how I play games. For most of them, it's just about playing less. I get tired quickly, so I can't have the good old extensive sessions where I get myself so immersed I forget to eat. A complex feeling arose when I started to play a style of games we call walking simulators. Games where you usually walk around while experiencing a great narrative or atmosphere. They tend to be slow-paced, story-centered games with little gameplay, simple by the nature of the controls offered to the player. And yet, now that my world has stopped, now that movement feels like a luxury, now that wheels took some responsibilities away from my legs, I see walking sims through a new lens. A subversive experience that intertwines the notions of projection and catharsis. You won't find anger or envy here, at least not in the way you might expect. There is no resentment for those characters who can do what I can't. I told you, this is not a sad story. It's just a weird journey through art and health. You walk a lot in video games. Before I was sick, the fact that characters could just run across the map without any limitations would sometimes annoy me. Beside Aragorn, Legolas, and a little bit Gimli, nobody should have that endurance, right? But in terms of gameplay, of course it's the right choice. There's something comical to spamming Whirlwind Sprint in Skyrim while waiting for your stamina bar to come up. And then when I got sick, what became really weird was that I would become the character's stamina. Playing would get me tired, and so running around even in a virtual world would actually deplete my energy. For the first time in my life, I felt the effort of a character. I would catch myself exhausted as I trailed between the United Cities of Americas in Death Stranding. The amount of meters or mechanics that represented the physical state of some bridges didn't matter. These gamified representations of tiredness, none of them came close to the incentives given by my actual body and mind being depleted by my efforts. I wanted to rest. That quest to reunite the land of the free actually took a toll. It also elated the time it took for me to complete it. The shorter but more rigorous sessions forced by my condition made me fill the passing days with a consistency that brought me closer to the character. So, weirdly, the fact that walking is now harder for me made me feel more like a character that only walks. He walks impossible distances burdened by a ridiculous inventory while I struggle to do my groceries. And yet, I felt like him. Because never before had I felt in my body such a challenge, a physical and mental exhaustion that could compare to Sam's hardships. I could project myself into the story. I felt one of the game's themes in my bones. I was in synchronicity with Sam. My understanding of the toll of his work wasn't just a question of writing, animations, and modeling. My body felt like his. And that was weird. It was new. It wasn't painful. I half expected that maybe I would go through that cinematographic moment where I would be pissed at anything that reminded me of my handicap. It never happened. It just made it easier to connect with the game. A weird gift emerging from my surreal state. And I also felt it playing through Bethesda's catalog. These worlds felt more alive and real. It grounded their scale. It made me appreciate even more walking through them without using fast travel too much, because walking from one place to another also gave me time to rest my mind. A pause from reading and listening to NPCs actually helped me pace the experience and not tire myself faster than necessary. could breathe in the details, the work of the modelers, and the attention that went into the world's layout. The disease changed my experience of playing these games with big worlds meant to be traversed. The walking simulation became physical, and the steps taken by the character now found their echoes in the real world. Of course, it hindered the power fantasy of the hero that conquers all, but by losing a bit of that quality, it gained a grounded experience that felt truly fresh. I do miss the ease and respite of just playing to forget everything, losing myself into the experience. It's a luxury that now only exists for maybe an hour on good days. But I can't say that I don't appreciate once in a while this new form of immersion. A new way to project myself into these worlds, these stories, a new way to experience an artistic proposition. But there's another notion that came to mind in these last couple of months. One close to projection, but that would sometimes be its complete opposite. A feeling we call catharsis. Catharsis refers to the process of releasing a strong emotion by watching someone experience something similar, often in art. Like when you watched 500 Days of Summer after your first real bad breakup, and there was a feeling of calm that came with Tom letting go at the end. Art has this way of condensing a journey that might take you years to go through into just a couple of hours. I believe that games have a particularly strong cathartic effect since the distance between you and the character can be lessened by the interactive nature of the experience. And these last couple of months, walking sims that are defined by a very well-developed theme were some of the greatest cathartic moments I've had. Short games that managed to make me go on a journey that felt like my own. 4 games come to mind when I'm talking about this. A Short Hike, What Remains of Edith Finch, Firewatch, and That Dragon Cancer. Each of them would deserve its own video. Well, one already did, but in this case, I'll approach them in relationship with my condition more than as an independent art piece. Though maybe for games with such an emotional foundation, it would be hard to do otherwise. A Short Hike is an indie game by Adam Robinson Yu, where you play as Claire, a bird needing to find reception at the top of a mountain to take a mysterious call. It is an absolutely wholesome game filled with compelling characters living their wonderful little adventures. It's about the juxtaposition of the simple joys of life and its worries. There are things to collect and content to find, but the game never really pushes it. It just wants you to play, to enjoy your time while you find your way to the top of the mountain. You choose when you want to climb or when you want to just have a good time with a new friend. You choose between handling a struggle and distracting yourself from it. And I found that dance, that relationship between confronting hardships and escaping them, deeply cathartic. It's a difficult balance to strike, only seeking escape delays the grief and makes it that much harder when it inevitably finds you. But making your every living moment about the hardest thing you are going through isn't really a functioning solution either. Dealing with our misfortunes is acknowledging that no amount of joy will make the pain go away. But we have to try to make the opposite also true. It's not always possible. Some pains are so all-encompassing that almost no distractions can make you forget them. But through the process of acceptance, if you're lucky, you'll see joy and pain cohabit, as it does for me now. The feeling of loss never took away the joy of a conversation with a friend, the relief of a good game, or the amazement I feel in front of a great work of art. And for that, I am profoundly grateful. At the end of a short hike, you finally take the call. The scenery is splendid. Everything's gonna be fine. It's an ending that fits the tone of the game, but it is one that you don't always find in real life. Sometimes bad things do happen. The truth at the core of What Remains of Edith Finch. What Remains of Edith Finch is another great walking sim by a giant sparrow where you play Edith as she goes back to her childhood home to uncover the true story of her family. It is a tale of passed down generational trauma, one I analyzed earlier this year, that treats with grace the subject of death. A family with a life expectancy so short it is rare for any of the Finch to blow more than a couple candles. It is about the way pain shapes us, and it doesn't shy away from how ugly that transformation can be. It touches dark subjects with the appeasing quality of poetry. Stories are presented through metaphors and creative use of interactivity. It finds its own way of actually dealing with the subject without making light of it. This was an important thing for me. I know you couldn't tell by listening to this channel, but in real life, I'm usually the funny guy. I do improv comedy shows where I tell dick jokes to people who have no idea what day I had. Or at least I did before I got sick. I make fun of everything that happens to me, even this disease, and for a long time in my life, I did that to a fault. By almost exclusively joking about life's harder moments, I actually feared to express how painful they were. What I couldn't make bearable, I hid. In truth, this channel was a way to give voice to that more serious and emotional part of me, to express things without the cover of humor. What Remains of Edith Finch reminded me of that sometimes I'll need to talk about this fucked up thing that is happening to me without fearing the fact that it is heavy. If humor is a way to make light of it, art is a way to retain its heaviness but still make it bearable. Creating is cathartic for artists. If pain transforms us, art is often about transforming pain. And to an extent, it's what I try to do here. Capture the essence of an experience and share it to people in the hope that they find a connection with their own life, their own truth. And sometimes the connection is really easy to make. Firewatch hit too close to home. The premise is simple. It tells the story of Henry, a man who escapes his personal troubles by taking a job as a fire lookout in a national park back in 1989. And that personal trouble is his sick wife. She has early onset Alzheimer's. The sickness slowly took everything away from her and he became her caregiver, which he ended up despising. And so he left. It hit close to home because it's what I fear the most, to become that burden. At the beginning of the disease, when we didn't know what it was and even less how to manage it, I wouldn't have been able to fully take care of myself. When trying to push myself, I would end up underground, depleted, unable to move. All I could think was that no one deserved to spend time on me, sacrifice parts of their lives to give me a semblance of normalcy. I felt like Henry because I wanted to flee. I wanted to leave that life of mine and just walk around Wyoming's wilderness, trail beautiful landscapes, hide in a watchtower with a good book. But I'm not Henry in this story. I'm Julia, his wife. I'm the inciting incident, not the protagonist. And the catharsis I felt was that I finally heard someone actually demoralized and filled with resentment as a caregiver. It's not a conversation you get to have because people don't want you to feel bad. Especially with your significant other. It changes everything, but it's hard to acknowledge it. By listening to Henry venting to Delilah during his daily walks, she being his boss and the other main character in the story, I felt like I could finally get a moment of honesty. Delilah sometimes normalizes the fact that it's okay to want to flee, to feel overwhelmed, to even resent his wife. It wasn't her choice to fall ill, but it also isn't his. Nobody chooses that life, and it's okay to be pissed that it happened. It's also okay to want to leave. I know that vows usually come in sickness and in health, but who actually knows what that means when they make that promise? In a world where most people try to make you believe that everything is going to be okay, it felt good to finally hear someone actually talk about the fact that it won't be. Firewatch was a flawed and yet wonderful work of fiction where you looked at a character introspect while walking and climbing. I just want people around me to continue to walk and climb. The next game, the last one I played on the list, is special because if these last 3 games were amazing creations, this one is not fiction. It's about something that actually happened. Last game, the heavier one. Know that it treats without barrier of the subject of a kid die of cancer. A real kid. So if you want to skip that part, it's okay. Some things can be too heavy. That Dragon cancer follows the story of the Green family as they learn and deal with the cancer diagnosis of their fourth kid, Joel. The developer and his wife, Ryan and Amy, found in game making their way to tell that story, to offer us the passenger seat to what is probably the worst thing that you can ever go through. It is a poignant retelling filled with love and loss. A big part of the catharsis for me was to finally find someone that would talk about the everyday aspect of being gravely ill. To be clear, I know what I'm going through is profoundly different, but it did surprise me how similar certain things could be. How weird all of it is, how this life-shattering news just becomes part of the routine. How surreal it feels when you just adapt to it. How fast it becomes the new normal. Cycling to specialists, going to an MRI machine in the middle of the night. How pills named pile on as if you were back in school trying to learn all the elements of the periodic table. There's a scene in the game where the Greens have the final prognosis. There is no more hope for Joel. It opens up with,
I'm sorry, guys. It's not good.
It's also the title of the song you are listening to. You cycle through everyone's point of view, Ryan and Amy, but also the doctors, as they tell parents that their child will die. There's nothing they can do anymore. I can tell you that even for professionals, for people who deal with it every day, it's also hard. My GP had a hard time dealing with it. We now joke about it. He now says I'm his worst patient because he can't do anything to help me. We laugh about it now, but at the beginning it was an actual problem. He wouldn't accept it. ME and long COVID are very weird diseases which we know very little about, and the absence of knowledge can both be disheartening, but also fill you with false hopes. He wasn't aware of the research on the disease and wanted to try many things that were proven not only to be ineffective, but ones that could actually be harmful. He just wanted to help. And I would read everything I could on the question, even though it would take me weeks instead of hours. And at some point I was the one quoting research papers at my doctor, so he wouldn't try something that could actually make my life worse. He had to learn to accept powerlessness. Not only me. In fact, I accepted it faster than him. My internist was better at dealing with that feeling, but I was really fascinated by how much the grief process actually applied to my GP. I still think a lot about how much they can go through, how hard it also is for them. Because it's a hard thing to get to, acceptance. It's a daily fight, and some days you'll catch yourself hoping for a miracle, even though you know it won't come. And it's where I'm gonna talk about anger. Because I felt actual rage playing this game. And it caught me by surprise. I was enraged, but not at life for its unfairness, not at doctors for their powerlessness, but at Joel's mother. I was pissed at a woman losing her child because she grasped at hope desperately. It was not my highest point. I was particularly pissed because of this exchange.
Despair doesn't help anything.
Neither does false hope. And I'm not despairing.
How can you say false hope? You're drowning!
Well, you're missing your oars! And you don't even know where you're going. And yet you're so sure you're gonna get there.
It's better than drowning.
Well, enjoy floating on the surface like you always do.
There's nothing deep about drowning. Just get in the boat.
You have to let me feel this! Someone has to.
That's not fair. I love him as much as you do. I just really believe we're going to be okay.
That's a conversation I've had. And I got angry at being framed as a pessimist for not hoping for a cure anymore, for a significantly improved life. I rejected that accusation with all my being. About 95% of people in my situation won't see an improvement that will bring them even close to what they were before. I was pissed because this is not pessimism. This is fixing the truth. Ryan was facing the truth, and Amy couldn't, and so she blinded herself with the false promise of a benevolent God who would save Joel, even though doctors told them there was no more that could be done. I was pissed at Amy because she was leaving him alone with that fact, like I was left alone. It's not pessimism when it's just true. And hope isn't a virtue by itself. Sometimes all it is a sad coping mechanism. But it sounds so noble to hope. It's as if she was in a dark room and she closed her eyes and then said, "It's not pitch black, I just have my eyes closed." We all know that opening your eyes won't make light appear. At the end of the scene, Ryan is stuck underwater. You can't reach the surface. And then you turn to the depth of the lake where the light is, and you swim. This is the way. That dragon cancer made me fully feel that anger and made me feel less alone. I knew there was someone somewhere that could understand the toxic nature of positivity, how it can act as solid bandages applied on an open wound. How hard it is to make people understand that by rejecting hope, by swimming towards the bottom of the lake, you're not refusing treatment. You are learning to live with the life that you have. You are healing what can be healed. I've been thinking about this game every day since I played it. I listened to its soundtrack on repeat. I miss the warm voice of Ryan, and I let go of my anger towards Amy. They both created this with such bare honesty that all I can do is feel love for them and be grateful for the wonderful transformation of their pain. This is truly art. I'm sorry if this was heavy, or heavier than necessary, should I say. I didn't want to just display sorrow. I know it will sound contradictory, but I actually see these walking sims and even my situation with a hopeful eye. Not in the sense that everything will turn out great. Life doesn't work that way. But in the sense that there is a path that continues even after the worst happens. You'll go through the impossible and find out that you'll just end up taking the next step. That's the message behind all these games. As long as there's a road, you'll keep on walking. Well, in my case, it's also rolling from now on. Thanks for lending me your ears. I'm glad there's this weird mix of distance and proximity that this form of creation offers. I feel physically as far as can be from any of you, and yet I feel okay sharing these events without the respite of humor. And it helps. I hope you are doing okay out there, even through hardships. I hope you keep on walking.